Hello everyone, welcome to the Wildland Q&A session. My name is Wodek. I'm helping the team with their communication efforts, and today I have the privilege to hosting and moderating a Q&A session about Wildland. Together with me we have Joanna Rutkowska, Julian Zawistowski and Andrzej Regulski. I'm not going to introduce to them because I don't think there's a need to do so. If you've never heard of them before, you can go to wildland.io/team and then you will find their bios, credentials, contact info and whatnot. What is really important is that they are the main architects of Wildland. And as you probably know, Wildland client has just seen its first release, which gives us an opportunity to talk about the project itself, the reasons behind it, its current status, and also the plans for the near future. The formula for this session is quite simple. First, I'm gonna ask our panelists some basic questions, and then hopefully they will give us some interesting answers. And after that, if you will have like follow-up questions, you would like to ask them about something that was not covered during the discussion, just raise your hand and I will open the floor for the questions. So without any further ado, let's start, and let's maybe start with a big one. Why are you doing this? I mean, this is a huge project that requires a lot of effort. It is quite complicated. There are many obstacles to tackle. So why are you committing yourself to such a big and demanding project? Why is there a need for a project like Wildland?
Probably our reasons for doing that are not 100% the same, but I think we agree on all the basic principles. And to me,
by we he means me and him, I guess.
And then Andrzej as well, but we are discussing
about the
very
disagreement.
Often about this disagreements and agreements. So the strapline is freedom to your data, and of course. This is a very good strapline, at least in my opinion. I like it, but of course, data is nothing. I wouldn't spend my life working on data. Of course, this is about a freedom for people, in fact. So I believe the world today is the world where we are more and more dependent on data, and we use more and more data, and we produce more and more data. And the paradox is that while we are more and more dependent on data, we also have less and less control over our data, over our digital lives, in fact, over many things that surround us. And while infrastructural level project like Wildland cannot answer all the questions around that problem, cannot solve all the problems we have here. It can help by giving a layer where the user, the person, can have much higher control over data, much higher chance of keeping control of the data and having them available all the time than without Wildland. And to discuss the exact reasons of why we are losing control right now, why we are endangered by not having our data available, goes a little bit beyond the scope of a simple Q&A. But I believe that the two main reasons are, first, that centralizing things is convenient, and we all are lazy, so we like the convenient solutions. And the second is that there is a conflict of interest, in fact, between the producers of the solutions we use as users and our interests. And so we would like to first give the infrastructure layer that would give the user better control over data and also make the interaction with the data much better from a much lower level, which is the file system. And second, and this is a little bit farther down the road, also to create an ecosystem which will be like a user-friendly and ultimately user-controlled.
So I would like to add something to that.
To disagree.
Maybe not quite disagree, but to show it from a different perspective. So if you are a reductionist, so if you believe that the essence of you is not some little person in your head or homunculus, or you don't believe in soul, but if you believe that you are an information, essentially, you are a thread of information, it's easy to understand that information is really what matters. And information, right now, as it's, our civilization shows, information is stored as data in files. So data is important as a carrier and storage for information, and we really need some kind of reliable tools and infrastructure for securing information which is essential for us. Right now, this might be just your personal notes or photos. In the future, as more and more progress is made in things like AI, for example, securing important information will be more and more important. And you can look at Wildland as an infrastructure, protocol, or tool to make it easier for any individual to take more control about how the information that is important to them is actually secured or controlled.
Okay, thank you. So now that we know what kind of problems you are trying to solve, let's take a step back. And I will give you probably a bit simpler question. What is Wildland?
So again, Wildland can be seen from different perspectives, and it's easiest probably to think about Wildland right now as something like Dropbox, or Dropbox or Google Drive, except that instead of one set vertically integrated infrastructure provided by Dropbox or Google or whatever, you have control over any kind of infrastructure that you can use through Wildland. And part of this will be a marketplace, which we are building now, which will make it more seamless for a user to choose many different kind of storages and implement redundancy for an important container. But essentially, at the end of the day, it is something that is like Dropbox, but allowing you to decouple yourself from any one specific company providing storage infrastructure. But then you can, as I just hinted a minute ago, you can look at it in a broader sense as an information management tool, or maybe even knowledge management tool, because we built some interesting features into Wildland, like this cascading addressing that you saw in the demo, or multi-categorization, which, by the way, we got for free when we were thinking how to build Wildland, which would be infrastructure agnostic. So we got for free this multi-categorization and cascading addressing, which now we believe is something that opens up Wildland to thinking about it as a tool for quite powerful organization of any kind of digital information that pertains to my life. And then we have, of course, in the more distant futures, we have some more plans to add some ability to execute code by containers, making it even more closer to Web 2.0. But for now, I think it's easiest to think about Wildland as those two things. Something like Dropbox, but infrastructure agnostic, and information unification management tool.
So people have pretty good idea what to do with Dropbox. Can you give us some use cases for Wildland?
You can, of course, use Wildland for everything you use Dropbox for, or soon, as we will get more GUI, this will be more mainstream. But the point is, you don't maybe see it as a use case that your files are now stored on different providers. You only can see it when, for example, Dropbox would or any other company would decide to deny access to your files. On Wildland, we believe this might be the probability of such an event might be much more can be controlled to be much lower, because they can choose 3 different providers on 3 different continents. So use cases here would stay the same, but reliability of access to my data will move on. But there are also other use cases that.
Yes, well, of course, like using Dropbox as an example is nice, because probably everyone knows what Dropbox is. But also the problem is when that of course that locks us in that notion of Dropbox. So yeah, this is some kind of cloud storage where you put your files and you can share those files with others, and that's about it. And of course this is something that you can do on Wildland pretty easy. Maybe not that easy right now, as you could see, but we are working on improving like UX to the level where that would be not much more complicated than on Dropbox. But then Wildland is something much more. And if you think about use cases for Wildland, you have to come back to the slide that Joanna showed at the very, very beginning of the demo. And that slide shows just a catalog with directories. And it was like just a normal collection of directories, of folders on your computer. But yet, every folder in that directory could live on a different backend, on a different infrastructure, and be shared with you by the different person. And if you think about that this way, this is a kind of file system internet. And I agree that the notion of a internet on a file system, where you just click on the folders and you go deeper and deeper, and in fact you do not end at the end of the path on your local computer with the spreadsheet that you created last week, but you can go down the road to all possible resources that other people shared with you from the world. So that sounds a little bit like a 90s and Web 1.0, and maybe that alone is not that exciting. But if you think then that on that very, very basic layer, which is like the file system, people can get that and can build on top of that, this is much, much more than just Dropbox, because then you can imagine Wildland as a backend for apps, as a way of organizing knowledge going well beyond your personal note-taking system, but also organizing knowledge like Wikipedia, but on many different like hierarchies. You can easily imagine Wildland as a way of exposing things like Gutenberg project, for example, so the collection of all the books that are copyleft books and many others. So and in all honesty, like, we don't know where it is going, in a way that although we can envision a lot of possible use cases, with technology like that, you often ends in a little bit different or totally different place than the one you thought you will be heading. But at the moment, the first use case is definitely personal cloud file storage solution, where you can very easily decide on which backend your information, your knowledge is stored. And of course, once this is equipped with the market, you can very easily get new storages, create as much as redundancy as you want. And to me, the very important feature, of course, is this coming user-defined organization, but I believe we'll talk about that more later.
So yeah, let's talk about what is already possible within Wildland. You've just released the first implementation of the Wildland client. Jana, could you tell us, please, like, what do you consider to be highlights of this release?
Yes, as we just saw in the demo, there are essentially 3 highlights that we find pretty exciting. The first highlight is what Julian just said, that you have many different containers, each container potentially stored on a different backend, or not potentially, as you saw in the cafe demo, it's actually on different backends by different persons, and then are still yet exposed in the same way as something like Dropbox is exposed to you. So you as a user don't even need to be aware where your data are. Which, by the way, has another nice feature implied, is that once I want to move from my data from one provider to another, say from Dropbox to Google Drive, or my photos from Instagram to somewhere else, I can move it, or I can have my script underneath move it automatically to a new backend, and I still, as a user, don't even need to notice it, which makes it easier for me to choose the best offer, the best current offer for storage, for example, which might make the market more competitive. So this is one thing, the unified view of a file system which is stored on different backends. The second was this multi-categorization, which is that every container can be tagged or have many different paths, and they are all equal and they all can lead to this container, which we believe is essential in making file systems useful as a useful tool for organizing data or as a knowledge management tool. And the third one is this cascading addressing, where we use Ariadne forest to find other forests, and from other forests we could find even more forests. And this, we believe, is something very exciting, because we can build very complex directories of how forests can be found between different communities, say, get around censorship, essentially build alternative internets that way, not worrying about some single root of trust as we need to do in current internet.
Talking about alternative internet, what do you see as the key differences between Wildland and other projects aiming to decentralize the web and secure data availability? Okay,
there are a few differences. Usually these days when we hear about decentralize XYZ, this is usually some project from blockchain space, which usually advertises, let's put XYZ on blockchain. Even though we are closely related to a blockchain technology, specifically to Ethereum, and our marketplace will work on Ethereum as a set of smart contracts, still, Wildland is essentially independent from Ethereum. You can use Wildland without any kind of connection with Ethereum, without any wallet whatsoever. You can configure all your backends yourself. It's only that the marketplace will be used by a dedicated piece of software to easily offer user all those storages, so that user will not be bothered in actually configuring those storages, creating storage templates, etc. This will all be done automatically in future versions. But essentially, Wildland is independent from any blockchain technology. So that's the one differentiator. Another differentiator is that lots of projects who claim, again, decentralized XYZ, they go into what I like to call P2P fetishism. usually when you think about the spectrum of decentralization, on this end you have a fully centralized, fully vertically integrated offerings like, say, Google Drive. And then on the other hand of the spectrum, you have fully decentralized, a P2P network, point-to-point peer-to-peer network, which has no assurance or no assumptions about what nodes are taking part in the network, and where reliability comes from the numbers. Say in Ethereum, where you have 5,000 nodes being the mining nodes, you get the reliability of the Ethereum virtual machine from these numbers. For Ethereum, this works pretty well, but for other, because there is a very incentivizing mechanism built in. For other things like storage and computations, this might not work so well, and we saw many, at least several projects which faced obstacles when trying to implement this end of the spectrum of decentralization, this fully peer-to-peer approach where like anyone can connect to the, let's say, storage sharing network, anyone can connect their laptop and provide some piece of storage. Then troubles start when I close my laptop, storage disappears. Of course, there is some redundancy built in, but this redundancy also implies a higher cost per terabyte, usually higher latency, etc. So what we believe we do in a bit of non-standard way is that we are more pragmatic in this. We call it a pragmatic decentralization. So we don't tell the user, ditch any kind of data centers, use only P2P network. We say, use whatever you want. If I want my containers to be stored on AWS and Google Cloud Platform and Alibaba, I can use those three backends. Even though they are three centralized offerings, I believe that my reliability, accessibility of my data will be pretty good if each container will be stored on those three. Yet, all those offerings are actually optimized for fast access, low latency, etc. So again, the novelty of Wildland, I believe, is this pragmatism in actually giving user the choices, and soon the user will have, as we said, easier way, because the user will be able to delegate those decisions to the marketplace by configuring how actually what conditions should be met to get the storage.
Yeah, I would like to add to that. First, in fact, Wildland is not about storage in a way. Of course, at the end of the day, it is about storage. But Wildland is about being able to change the place where you have your data as easily and smoothly as possible. And that's it. So although our approach is different than of projects that are after decentralized storage, we love projects that are decentralizing storage in a peer-to-peer way. We have high esteem toward those projects, but the truth is that this is extremely hard. And in fact, there is a lot of unsolved problems there. Even if you see some things in the productions, there is still a lot of unsolved problems with a real bottleneck to adoption. So we thought that perhaps the best way is just to create something that will make a user in control of where the data are in a very simple way. So even if you are not a very experienced DevOps, then you are able to switch your data from S3 to Google Cloud or to IPFS, if that's a matter. Because in fact we are...
Or to your private NAS.
Or your private NAS or whatever else. Because of course, this is another important thing, that as we are as we are trying to be as backend agnostic as possible, like adding like decentralized storage solutions to Wildland in principle is also possible. Of course, if there are limitations to those storages, those limitations will also apply through Wildland, which is quite obvious. So I would say that the most important difference is that we are doing something else than most of projects that are about decentralizing storage.
Okay, quite a lot of people are also thinking about decentralizing internet because they are worried about outside moderation of data feeds, which, as we all know, can be like really heavy-handed. Is there any connection with what you call like data availability and what people are calling censorship resistance?
I like to think about censorship resistance as a special case of data availability. When we think censorship resistance and we hear this term, we usually think about some freedom fighters in say Asia or in Belarus. We think, oh, this is something exotic. Of course, poor people, we would like them, or we wish all the best for them. But we from the West, we don't think much about it. It doesn't apply much to us. But data availability might be a broader term, and if I have my photos on, say, Instagram, and suddenly Instagram decides for whatever reasons to shut down my account or lock up my account, or maybe change something that my photos will stop being available to me, I just lost access to it. And this is as bad for this person as censorship resistance, as a censorship to some other people, because I suddenly lose part of my digital life. So, and yet all of us use those centralized services, and all of them have full control of to be able either maliciously or not to cut us from our data. I don't know if this answers your question clearly.
Definitely, especially that I can relate to some of what you said, because I'm not really proud of that, but I'm a Facebook user and I was once cut off from the service from whatever reason. I have no idea why. No one told me why I cannot access my account. I couldn't get to the help desk in any way. Just was extremely weird, and it's quite annoying.
We are at the mercy of some AI algorithms, right? Or who decide whether to allow us or not to access our social graph, our photos.
By the way, maybe it's worth adding here that we are not building a second Facebook, of course. But if you think about like how things like Facebook or other social media could be changed, this is probably that interoperability. So allowing other entities to use to connect to the Facebook. So this is like the federalization of that. So if I have like the orange phone, I can still call Joanna even if she has her phone in T-Mobile, and basically that should work that way, in my opinion, with the social media. But then also those data have to be stored somewhere, and we believe that down the road, Wildland can be very convenient solution for that, because then you just keep your data in your container and you decide like who has access.
Essentially, we really like, we still remember times when people actually used and understood what a file is. And file is a pretty cool concept, because if you can have a file, you can copy it to your storage. You nearly can hold it in your hand, right? With a service, like a web service, you cannot do that. A service is just an API interface, which can be shut down anytime. On the other hand, files are you store on your disk or somewhere, and they cannot be so easily taken away from you. That's why a storage focus or file system focus is so important or so central to Wildland.
Okay, so you hinted several times during the discussions on like future use cases for Wildland. What are the like plans for the nearest future when it comes to the like futures and improvements? What would you like to see and like next year improved on a client?
So we right now we work in 3 areas of where we want to improve the current 0.1 client. One area is make it easier to use. And this is all kind of UI, file manager extensions. This is also a marketplace on Ethereum, as well as software that will automatically, on behalf of the user running locally, contact the marketplace and find and buy or rent containers and return to Wildland clients, so the Wildland client can actually use the storage. So this is all ease of use, UX. The other area is performance. Just make it faster, sorts of caching, etc. And then the third area, which gets less priority. So we first work on these 2, and then maybe some months later, our focus will shift more to this third area, which is make Wildland more universal. So right now we have storage backends for S3 storage, Google Drive, Dropbox, WebDAV, and a few more exotic like IMAP mailbox, GitLab, Bear, which is a note-taking app, so I can expose all my notes from Bear as a number of microcontainers, and probably a few more. But in the future, we want to have even more backends. So I imagine, for example, that I could have an interface that will show my forest, so my file system namespace as a graph, like animated graph. I can zoom in. So I go to work, Wildland, and I zoom in. I find like reports, clients, whatever. I see a report, and then I add a category like my devices, remarkable, which is a nice tablet I'm using. And then suddenly this container gets also available on my remarkable tablet, which I can take with me on a walk and then read in a park. And then I can add another category like mailbox something, which will automatically make it to be emailed to somewhere I have backend for configured. So this is a category about adding more integrations and integrating with other apps and building an ecosystem.
And we do hope that at some point that will be done not only by us. By us, I mean Golden Foundation and like things that are done directly by our team, because here we come to the area where there is like a lot of space for community effort as well.
Okay, so you've mentioned the marketplace a couple of times, and I know that this puzzles some people because why would I need to buy extra storage for a marketplace when I can use Dropbox or Google Drive with Wildland, because you've made a plugin available which is like really easy to use. So why bother with a marketplace? What's the use for it?
Yeah, I would reverse the question. So if we want to create something that at the end will be, we'll use marketplace that we will build, and of course we want that marketplace to be used because of the user-defined organization and GLM that I will mention later. So we want all of that to be used. So in fact, why allow users to add like other backends like Dropbox or Google Drive? And I think that there is a very good reason to allow user to use any backend the user wants to use on the one hand, and also I believe that there is a very good reason for long-term Dropbox user or long-term Google Drive user to still use the marketplace. First, why we want people to be able to add any possible backend to Wildland in as convenient way as possible. So, if we are talking about freedom, and if you are talking about decentralization, then building any kind of walled garden only for the sake of our marketplace would be like just nonsense. Also, like, of course, sometimes that kind of limitation can be the result of the technology. For example, my truly favorite decentralized storage project, IPFS. And of course, and Filecoin. And then, of course, like this is the result of the technology alone that you have to use IPFS to store things on IPFS, because this is about IPFS. But if you are backend agnostic, then we have to be truly backend agnostic. So it has to be relevant whether this backend is bought from our marketplace or comes from outside. Going further, like if you want to use S3, AWS S3 as a storage backend, then of course, if you can buy that on the marketplace, obviously you should be able to use that also directly from AWS. And I truly believe that allowing user to easily, for example, integrate their Dropbox or their Google Drive or their whatever is the best way to give a boost to adoption. So because all of a sudden you do not have to switch from Dropbox to Wildland. You just use Wildland to give superpowers to your Dropbox. And then once you start using it, you can see that there is also a marketplace, and getting storage, different kind of storage, maybe with the properties very, very different to the Dropbox you have, is very convenient and gives you like a real control. You can break out of Dropbox. So this is a kind of...
I can give a quick example.
Sure.
For example, in the future, we believe it will be possible to configure your agent, which will go to marketplace, to always get, like for your sensitive containers, which you somehow tag, you always get 3 storages from 3 different continents. So, to increase reliability against jurisdiction shutdown kind of attacks.
Yeah, so this is also the reason to increase redundancy. So I think that if we were to limit users in a way, in that regard, that would only make Wildland worse than better. So that's the reason, basically.
Okay, thanks. Andrzej, I have a question for you, because you've been awful quiet down at the end of the couch. The Golem Foundation has just released the Wildland client. It's not yet as user-friendly as we probably would like. So what are your communication priorities with this release? Who are you targeting with it, and what you would like to achieve with your communication?
Okay, so let me take this one, even though it should be probably asking Włodek, who's one of the key persons behind Wildland's communication right now. But yeah, so as Włodek mentioned, the current version of Wildland is still rough around the edges. I would identify 3 target groups. Probably they overlap to some extent. The first one being potential hires. Actually, I can even see some potential hires in this room, which kind of proves that our communication strategy works. But yeah, so right now we have at least 7 open recruitments going on, and scaling up the team is one of the key priorities for us right now, which also means that we would like to use this opportunity to demonstrate how cool Wildland is and demonstrate the current version as something appealing to potential hires. So the first group are potential candidates. The second group are developers, and as both Joanna and... So Joanna some time ago mentioned that our priority down the road is making Wildland more universal, which means more plugins, more applications compatible with Wildland, more storage backends. And also Joanna mentioned that this is something that we do not necessarily want to develop as Golem Foundation, but this is something where we see some community effort, and this is why we also want to have some communication toward potential developers to make to convince them that Wildland is a platform to bet on and to build interesting applications. And the third one, the third group that we want to communicate with right now are early adopters. They surely overlap with the first groups I have mentioned. Well, we want to start and encourage people to start playing with Wildland, to send us feedback, to join the community, and start using subsequent releases that are coming in the months ahead.
Not only like power users for now.
Yeah, I mean, I think, well, troubleshooting Docker is not the most frequent mistake, but the most frequent problem that a user encounters, but still it, as you have seen, requires some confidence in using command line interface.
Also, if I can add, we have like 7 open recruitment processes, but many of them are for like more than one person.
Yeah.
So this is more than 7 people.
So right now, Wildland is developed mostly in-house, but you hinted that you actually would like to involve outside people in the development process. How are you going to do this? Yeah,
so we envision the development of Wildland as described in the white paper in the very long run. This is something probably Julian would like to elaborate on. But to start with, so the 0.1 version was developed by Golem Foundation and its contractors, but with the current release, we also want to start building an entire ecosystem of organizations, teams, individuals who contribute to Wildland. And at this stage, we want to achieve this by overhauling our grant program, which is kind of briefly described on Golem Foundation's website, but we are surely planning to add some more details to how we structure this and how potential submissions can be sent to us. Just to give you a hint, I can see at least 2 potential areas of funding. So the first one are like Wildland-specific grants for teams interested in building either plugins, like for new storage backends, plugins for applications that we want to make compatible with Wildland. So an application that right now is, let's say, self-hosted. We want to make sure that users of these apps can easily choose Wildland containers as the storage solution. So this is one area. The second area, it's a bit more broad and it's much more open. I would say is the tokenomics of Wildland. And here, first we would like to encourage potential applicants to submit proposals for enhancing the role of GNT, which is explained in the
GLM.
I'm sorry, GLM. I'm still the GLM, which is still briefly described in the paper, but we would surely want to build upon that. The second area is sub area of this is enrichment of our idea of the marketplace, which has not yet been delivered as a working prototype, but this is something which is like one of our priorities for the forthcoming months, and we would like to offer grants for anyone with interesting ideas related to the user-defined organization, proof of usage, and also which is like GLM centric. But I would say, like in this area, sky is the limit. So it will be much more open. And so you might expect an overhaul of the way our grant program is described on the website soon. If you are very eager to submit your proposal right now, feel free to send us an email with a brief description of the project, and we are happy to discuss how we could work together on that. And in terms of the development of the development of Wildland, I think Julian would like to add something about user-defined organization and how we see it.
Yeah, but is it now or this next question?
You can actually go ahead and
Okay. No, because
what is you though?
Thank you. That was very helpful. I will come back to I think what was on the first question. So we are doing this. And while, of course, the problem of how we lose sovereignty with our data, with our information, can be solved on technology level. Like, it is not the technology that caused that we have problem with that. And this is, the problem is how our internet, how our IT world is organized. So if we stick to the technology part of the answer, I think we will ultimately fail down the road, this way or another. Because at some point, we will run out of cash to develop that further, and the project will die or will become commercialized in a way that is one way or another evil. So, and I believe that the first, pretty obvious reason for centralizing things in a way that there is the central hub that controls everything and controls our data is convenience. And that part, of course, can be solved on a technology level, better or worse, but it can be solved. And this is what we do with the basic stuff we are working on right now. And while I think that, I think this comes as no surprise to anyone working with decentralized technologies, decentralizing things usually breaks them. So usually they unfortunately they usually work worse than a single centralized solution. But I think that actually what we are doing right now breaks it only a little, and still gives a lot of potential to that. So I think that we have an idea how to do that in a way that this will be reasonably decentralized, that will be pragmatic, the decentralization of how we interact with our data, but this will be still useful thanks to that. But of course, there needs to be a solution to the other part of the problem.
Can I just point out one thing? It's maybe interesting to note that when we were trying to make wildland agnostic to infrastructure, I said it's like Dropbox, but agnostic to infrastructure. We had to come up with this notion of a data container, and this data container had to be addressed independent of the infrastructure. And then suddenly we got for free some features, like I said, multi-categorization and this cascading addressing, which are useful, which are actually new features. So I think it's interesting that by trying to solve reliability by decentralization, we actually got for free 2 new features that actually make sense apart from the reliability assurances. Multi-categorization, because it's useful in categorization, for example. So I think this is pretty uncommon, and just wanted to point it out.
Okay, coming back to user-defined organization. So the problem is that I think this is impossible to to design a mechanism that will be both sustainable and will have a central commercial organization at the top and then users at the bottom. Even if this is if this organization is delivering a supposedly free services, then of course that can never work properly, because in fact the purpose of the organization will be always to exploit its users in a more or less obvious way. So obviously that is not working. But then even if this is paid service, which is for sure much better in most of the cases, still the organization will always have tendency to centralize things, to control things, to get rid of all the competitors, and then we can end up with the one organization that controls 90% of the market, and in fact we are not much better off when it comes to data availability, for example, and censorship resistance. So of course there is a lot of thinking in the decentralized space on how to solve that problem. But I think this is still unsolved, because the best thing I think we came out with so far is so-called DAO, so Decentralized Autonomous Organization, which is a very cool concept, and I really like it. But then there is a lot of problems with DAO, like historically and right now. Starting with the infamous DAO from 2016 that existed for a couple of weeks before it was successfully hacked or exploited. But even then, like before it was exploited, it was apparent that the problem is a lot of people bought in. They put like a lot of money into the decentralized autonomous organization, but they were not really interested in the governance of the organization. So, and this low participation is exactly the problem of all those kind of organizations, because let's be honest, usually people participate in them not because they are interested in any governance, but because they find a kind of equity or governance token that is there as a speculative asset that is worth having and which will bring like profits in the future, but they are not interested in the governance. So there are examples of more or less successful DAOs. I think that the one that is most interesting and to be watched at the moment is MakerDAO, and but still the same problem of low participation is existent there. And if the governance is organized around ownership of a speculative token, then we always have misalignment of interests between the owners of the tokens and the actual users. And while this problem may not be that apparent at the first glance, I believe this is in fact exactly replicating the structure we had with the traditional corporation, where the owner of the corporation is interested in the value of the asset represented by the share of the company, and not really in delivering the service that is best to the user. The owner is interested in delivering the service that brings most profit, and those are two totally different things. So we had like a kind of puzzle to solve, like 2 years ago when we started like working really hard on Wildland. How to solve the governance problem, so what we can propose as a governance, how to organize the marketplace, and also how to have GLM incorporated there in a meaningful way, because of course this is must-have for us. So we cannot work on Wildland if we do not have a way of using GLM in a meaningful way. And of course, like the first instinct here might be into like transforming ourselves at some point down the road into the DAO with GLM as a kind of equity token that can be used for a governance, blah, 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 blah. But that, of course, does not solve the number one problem I stated here, which is the different interests of the conflict of interest, in fact, between the token holders and the users, which can be potentially devastating. And also, that doesn't solve the problem of non-participation. And also, that kind of organization is very prone to any kind of attacks, because if you have like a very, very mature and stabilized organization with a high capitalization, then perhaps it is doable, and we have example of that. But before that happens, with the markets as they look right now, there will be like a quite long period when you can successfully attack the token in a social way, in an economical way. Not going into details, that is a very, very risky path. So we thought that perhaps the best idea will be to bind governance with usage. So why not like just have a metric of usage that will give a voting power to the users and to users alone. And then going further, like if this is given to the user, that should stay with the user. So that should be like my personal right but I shouldn't be allowed to transfer that to Andrzej if Andrzej is not using Wildland. And even if he is using Wildland, he should only have as much voting power as his usage indicates. So then the solution like pop out that we should just bind the voting rights, in fact, with the how much you use the market. So the final solution is that, like, I believe that the number of funds you spend on the marketplace to buy storage and possibly other things in the future, like, pretty well indicates like how much you use Wildland. At least in that part where we can easily measure that, and which matters in fact for us as for the creators that are down the road also interested in the GLM and how it is used. So the final mechanic is that every time you spend some funds on Wildland, a fraction of that funds is burned into GLM. So some of the GLM is removed permanently from the system, and corresponding amount of something we called proof of usage, POU, maybe we will come out with a cooler name at some point, is generated. But it's generated only to the user that spent money on that infrastructure. So this is like a token, but this is not standard ERC20 token on Ethereum network. You cannot transfer it. And this is your voting right in a user-defined organization that will be long-term responsible for managing things around Wildland. And I think this concept is really cool because in fact it can be used everywhere we have a market. Of course, it cannot be used, or it is very difficult to use for use cases where we do not pay for something, because then it is very that can be easily attacked. But if there is like a real spending, and if you burn some of that spending to remove like permanently some value in that process, that is in fact a very, very good protection against maybe not all of the attacks, because there is always possibly a way of attacking things, but this is a very, very strong protection against many types of attacks I can think of. And this is like what we are really excited about, and this is how we would like Wildland to evolve, and also Golem Foundation operations to evolve. So we will do more and more things through UDO, and less things as Golem Foundation and the core Golem Foundation team. In the ideal world, like everything will be run by UDO at some point. So I know this is a little bit dense, maybe I talked a little bit too long, but if you would like to read more about that, this is pretty well explained, I think, in the paper. And also we'll be talking about that and explaining that more in a weeks and months to come.
I have just one last question for you. What are your hopes for Wildland? Like, where do you see Wildland in like 3 years?
I think I already hinted about it just 2 questions before. Again, I want to be able to take any device, see the whole graph of all my digital data, all those that matter to me, see them as a navigatable graph, so I can zoom in to an area that's of interest for me right now, like maybe go to topics, ski touring, or work, Wildland, see my files, my containers there, see all the categories, find data by categories, be able to move containers between categories, to add new categories, which will result in say, containers or so data becoming available on other devices or in mailboxes of other persons. So essentially, for me, the end goal is a tool that gives me power to visualize and organize my digital life, my information, my digital knowledge management tool. At the same time, being quite reliable or having a reliability that I can control. If I pay more and I get more backends from more providers for each important container, I have more assurances that my data will still be available. Because see, this is quite important when you start relying on your digital tools for organizing knowledge about your life and knowledge and everything, you are starting to value your data more and more, and this means that you want more and more assurances that the ontology you're building is actually still will be available to you like a year from now, etc. So that's the more or less end goal for me.
Yeah, I will be more high level. So I think this is like a pretty bold experiment, both in technology, economy, and then governance. And of course, in my like a dream scenario, we are successful in all three areas.
Okay, so that's basically all from me. Thank you very much. But you can still ask questions. So anyone who's interested?
Is any other teams, companies doing similar projects somewhere around the world? Right. So that's the first question. And second question, I think Joanna was giving use cases for, let's say, consumers, for individuals. Do you have any view for the enterprises? Would it make sense for enterprises, businesses? Thank you.
Not really. Unlike most companies, we want to be on the side of the user, as Julian said a lot about aligning incentives, incentivizing us or the organization that supervises wildland development with the interests of users. So we really are on the side of users. And for your first question, are there any competition? Well, as I mentioned earlier, there are lots of, maybe not lots of, but there are several projects. Some of them were well-known projects like IPFS, for example, which try to do decentralized storage. Again, we believe that we are quite different from them. First of all, because we really are not providing storage. We really are providing a glue, a protocol to use storage as provided by others. And we, again, do not fall into this what I call P2P fetishism. We let the user use any kind of storage, not just any random nodes like traditional P2P storage projects. And also we believe we offer some important features, exciting features above just storage, which has said multi-categorization and cascading addressing, the whole notion of data container in the future also with attached code to it. So we believe these are quite exciting and we don't think there are other projects offering this kind of approach to storage. So we sort of take storage and upgrade it to knowledge management tool, while others, I believe, take storage and still provide storage, just have the storage more decentralized.
But also, there are hundreds of interesting projects around, and we are not able to dig into details of all of them. So perhaps someone is building something identical around, and we don't know that. And also adding to the second question, I think that the most important thing to notice is that a lot that you can do with Wildland, like a corporation with its IT department, can achieve maybe not very easy, but it is doable. Okay, so corporations can migrate the data from one data center to another, maybe not as seamlessly as with Wildland, but this is something what they do. So I would say that sometimes I like to refer to Wildland as a DevOps to the masses. I know that our developers do not like that term, but this is how I see it.
There are many projects that are seemingly similar, but we believe that they are really different. So first of all, maybe you have heard about data transfer project, which is like an initiative by the big tech, just for their APIs to communicate with each other, so that you can move your photos from Apple to Google, but it's still like APIs talking to each other, and it's like a federalization of big companies. It's not what Wildland is about, which is about controlling the infrastructure.
Hi, hello, Joanna. So my question is, how sustainable is your product, and in terms of ecological footprint, and how do you think if Wildland has a chance to increase or decrease the digital carbon footprint associated with the internet?
Okay, so first, because we really are not storage provider, rather infrastructure for choosing storage provider and then connecting them and consuming them in a convenient way. So I think this might imply that we at least might allow the user to use like more the greener providers. So we have I believe that Wildland might give people a choice to use it. And of course, I should again make note that Wildland is not dependent on any blockchain. As we know, blockchains in use today are proof-of-work-based systems which are very energy inefficient, very planet unfriendly. With Ethereum 2.0, this is going to change, hopefully, for much better. But again, Wildland is useful independent of it still. It's just the marketplace will not work and the user will have to choose storage by themselves.
And yeah, of course, like the footprint of the blockchain solutions is an issue. But yeah, we keep fingers crossed for ETH 2.0, and that hopefully will solve that part of the problem. Because even if the Wildland is useful without marketplace, as I said before, I don't think it can be long-term sustainable without user-defined organization for which marketplace, blockchain-based marketplace is instrumental.
Hello. Do you think that there is A, risk, and B, technical possibility that the corporations like Google or Microsoft or Alibaba, where you can store the files from Wildland, will they want to block you? So yeah, is there a risk for that, and B, is there a technical possibility?
How would they do that?
Well,
but this is my question to you.
Technically, that's of course possible because they can cut off anyone. So if they could have a technique to figure out that, say, my S3 bucket is used by Wildland, which they could fingerprint somehow and look for files that look like Wildland manifest. They can be encrypted. We can play cat and mouse game. They can use some heuristics maybe. I'd really be surprised if they really did it. But they can always cut off. That's why we want. That's why we're building Wildland, to give people a choice to use other storage providers and use them rather seamlessly. So if they cut me off, there are still dozens of other storage providers. Maybe not as big as AWS or Alibaba, but there are smaller data centers which you can still connect to. Many of them still expose storage over S3, for which we already have backend. You already can use probably half a dozen smaller data centers, like probably DigitalOcean or OVH, etc., with Wildland right now. So that I wouldn't worry about much.
Hello. How are you thinking about the big catalyzing event in the next, and I don't know when it's going to happen, 6 to 24 months? Is it I mean, event of the magnitude, so when people trading on Robinhood understood that in centralized finance, somebody can turn this off, right? So when do people understand and, the way Google and Apple are architected right now, it's possible to, for example, put backdoors in everything through pressure of antitrust suits that are happening, starting to roll right now in the US. Is this something that's going to hit general population 20 to 24 months? And or how are you thinking about what's going to push mass adoption of not developers and not us, that's we spent years thinking about decentralization and all this jazz, but just people out there being scared about their data and choosing apps based on who protects their data in a reasonable way?
Well, this is a difficult question because as you noted, like for us, this tipping point happened like some time ago. So this is difficult to speak on behalf of others. So I don't really know when it will happen and what exactly that event will be. I might speculate that that will be something that the general public will find unacceptable that way or another. But I think that there is clearly visible growing sentiment that that there is a problem here, and I don't think this is only a problem of a far right, which is censored probably a little bit more often than the others right now. I think that people can see that the way their data is used is generally harmful. Of course, there is a long way from there to using Wildland, because as I said, we are not building Facebook, so you cannot leave Facebook and use Wildland instead. But at least you can add Wildland to your technology stack and know for sure that for that part of your life you have reasonable control of that part of your life.
Hi, I was a little bit late, so sorry if you already answered that question. So what do you think will be the first major use case and the killer app, the first major company or service that will use Wildland?
Yeah, I think you're late because we talked about that, but I will repeat. So I believe that personal cloud storage is what we are working towards right now, which is something we are pretty close to at the moment, and is like a potential user base for that is like a hundreds of millions of people, if not billions. So even if this small fraction of that user base finds what we are building useful, it will be great. And also, as I will repeat that because this is important, the very cool thing about Wildland, also when it comes to like the regular user who just wants to store files somewhere, is that you do not have to use Wildland instead of Dropbox or Google Drive or whatever you have right now, but you can start using Wildland just to give some superpowers to what you already have, because even now Wildland has Dropbox integration, Google Drive integration, WebDAV integration, and like what else is important? Yeah, S3 integration. Of course, other like cloud providers are coming. This is simple. We just focus on S3 to start with. So yeah.
Okay, so one of the advantages that cloud-based apps have over the traditional file apps is that you have an ability to do real-time collaboration. Like if I store my files on Google Drive, then multiple people can edit a text document and see the changes in real time. And kind of the apps, both apps and storage backends are designed specifically to support this use case. So the question is it going to be supported when hosting data through Wildland?
So that's a complex use case, because when you collaborate using Google Docs suite, then it's a whole vertical stack of software. There's of course storage, and then there's the backends and front ends in your browser. They are all vertically integrated by one provider, which made it easy for them to provide you complex features used for complex collaboration. So we cannot do something like Google Docs arbitrarily decentralized on Wildland right now. We would need to work with app vendors that could write something like Google Apps with ability to use flexible storage, and one of the storage could be, for example, a Wildland container. And then you could get something like Google Docs collaboration on top of Wildland. But Wildland is much lower in the stack, at least for now, and can replace any kind of high-level app. Does that answer your question?
By the way, there is like this is very interesting topic, because if any one of you knows like a good alternative to Google Docs for collaborative editing documents, I would love to learn that alternative.
It's called Git and Markdown.
No, it's not.
We have this discussion every once in a while.
Yeah, I think you never used Google Docs, honestly.
There's a very good app for collaboration,
Script to app. Yeah, I know CryptoPad. We used that for a while, but the problem is it is not as good as Google Docs, unfortunately. This is once again that the price you have to pay with the decentralized things or open things that I mentioned before. Yeah, as for me, we can I can talk whole night. Just bring me some beer.
So in your model, commercial model, do you have any commercial interactions with the cloud suppliers?
Oh, this is a very good question. So basically, we are working on the project as Golden Foundation, and we are a non-profit entity. So basically, we are not looking for any commercial interactions with whomever. We are just building software, and we hope people will use it. The model here is that we want to have a marketplace where just people who have infrastructure to sell can come and can offer infrastructure to others. So basically, I don't think that Jeff Bezos personally will come and will offer AWS S3 there, but I can...
At least not initially.
Yeah, not initially, not in the first few weeks. But we hope that there will be some early adopters who will just enter the marketplace and resell AWS S3 access in line with how it is allowed by the AWS, of course, because there is an option for doing that.
Or from other storage providers.
Or from other storage providers, not necessarily from there, from anywhere. In fact, from personal NAS as well. And people will be offered that, and they will be able to buy it. So, and that's where this commercial interaction is. Of course, there is a problem of trusting that seller, and we are not solving the problem of trust. So basically, this is like totally externalized. So you will just have to decide whether you trust that seller or not. But this is exactly how it works in real life. So you basically trust the service you're buying that it will work. So and this is not going to be like the prosumer market. So we do not assume that people will sell like the free space of their hard drives. We rather think that Wildland will, most of the times at least, run on a professional infrastructure provided by professional resellers.